Happy Sabbath and Merry Christmas to everyone. How are you guys doing today? Good? You seem like to be still sleepy because probably of the opening of presents and gatherings, last night. We Filipinos, Christmas is so big to us, right? If you actually, sorry, let me fix it. All right, there you go. That's better. Thank you. If you actually ask the kids what is Christmas for them, they would tell you presents, gifts, right? If you ask, I actually asked our young people this morning during our Sabbath school upstairs, for them Christmas is break from school, break from doing homeworks, and family time as well. When you go older, when you go older, actually, things change, especially when it comes to looking at things, your perspectives, change as well, right? If I were to ask the adults, what is Christmas to you? You would probably give me different answers, right? Same thing when you are younger and getting older and older and older, right? But for Filipinos, basically when you talk about Christmas, is about family reunion. Back in the Philippines, it's Christmas time, during Christmas holidays, Christmas break, that is when the time that you see your friends that are working in Manila would come back to that small town where you all grow up together, right? And it means reunion. Relatives and friends that are living far, they would come home to the place where they grow up. And that is the time that you will have this, fellowship, reunion. Christmas is so special and so important to us. If I were to ask you, what is your most memorable Christmas experience? Every time every time I think of Christmas, I always think of the time that we were growing up back in the Philippines. Especially last night, I was watching the kids unwrapping the presents. I was thinking, man, these kids are lucky nowadays. Back then, you have to work hard in order for you to get your Christmas presents. We would go house to house. We would bring all these different types of instruments, not a regular instruments. It could be a big pot from the kitchen of our mom. It could be a kawale that would serve as the cymbal. Right? Or could be, this bucket used to fetch water that would serve as the main drum, snare drum. And we would go house to house doing Christmas carols. And for one song, that's equivalent to 1 peso. Right? Beautiful and memorable experience back home, right? And I'm pretty sure, especially those of you, grow up in the Philippines, have experienced that. And during this time also, we often hear of these stories about Christmas, about the birth of Jesus Christ, right? about him being born in a manger, about the shepherds, about this magi. We call it, in Christian tradition, we call it the three wise men or the three kings, right? But in the Bible, they call it the magi. Right? But, while I was reviewing this story of Jesus Christ, the birth of Jesus Christ, one thing that really puzzles me is the fact that the birth of Jesus Christ was revealed first to the shepherds and to the magi. Have you guys thought of that? To the shepherds and to the magi. That's why I titled my sermon today, The Messiah and the Outsiders. Right? You know what? This is a beautiful study, folks. Beautiful. I was so excited. After I finished this, I couldn't wait to share this to you. That's why my request, the favor that I would like to ask from you folks, from the youngest to the oldest today, whether you are here in this church or you are watching us live on Facebook, when we study, let us soak ourselves in this word, the word of God. So if possible, folks, let me just, it's Christmas time, so I can ask you a favor. Let's put away our phone. Let's put away our phones. All right, kids, young people, if you're holding your phones, let's put it away, just for 30 minutes. And let's soak ourselves with this word. And let's try to revisit the story of the birth of Jesus Christ. Again, the title is The Messiah and the Outsiders. So going back to what I was saying earlier, the Bible records two groups of people that have witnessed the birth of the Messiah. In fact, there are three of them, right? But only these two groups that have witnessed the birth of the Messiah. The first group that you will find there is the leaders of the church. Remember, there are three groups, all right? But only two groups have witnessed the birth of the Messiah. The first group that I was referring to is basically the leaders of the church. When you talk about the leaders of the church, we are talking about the Sadducees. When you talk about Sadducees, these are the wealthy people back then, right? Together with all the scribes. And when you talk about the scribes, they are known to be experts of the Jewish law, right? Experts of the Jewish law, teachers of the law. In fact, if you try to study, the background of these people, they knew the prophecy, right? Not just the prophecy, any other prophecy, but they knew about the prophecy about the Messiah. That the Messiah will be born in Judea, right? They knew about it. In fact, if you follow the story, in fact, our study is based on Matthew chapter 2. If you follow it there, based on the conversation between Herod and these leaders of the church, the scribes, right? They even quoted Micah. When Herod was inquiring if they knew about this birth of the Messiah, right? They even quoted the book of Micah and they said, yeah, we knew that the Messiah will be born in Judea. So they studied prophecies. They were expecting the coming of the Messiah. And they knew that the Messiah will be born in the area where they are. That is the first group, folks. The second group is the group of the shepherds, which I talked about, like 2 weeks ago. Right? Back then, just to give you a background, shepherds, they were nobody. Just like what I was telling our youth this morning, if you were a shepherd back then, and if you witnessed a crime, your testimony will not stand in the court because you are not a reliable source. That is how lowly shepherds back then. They were considered as thieves, right? In fact, no one wants to take that job because that job is only for lowly people. But yet, shepherds were one of these two groups that have witnessed the birth of the Messiah. And the third group that I'm talking that would like to discuss, which is the main focus of our study, is the Magi. Right? The Magi. What do we know about the Magi? Well, according to the study that I did, these are the people from the East. And when you talk about people from the East, this is not part of the Jewish nation, right? So they were considered as what? Outsiders. Outsiders. They are pagan astrologers, right? They are pagan astrologers whose divinatory skills were widely respected in the Greco-Roman world. They're astrologers. They don't believe in prophecies, but they believe in stars, information of stars, right? In fact, astrology was so popular back then that makes them believe that certain movements of stars signifies change in their political landscape. That is how they believe, particularly the pagan nations. Are you guys with me? Right? A good example of this is a falling star. We all say falling star in our time. And what do you normally do every time you see a falling star? You make a what? You make a wish. Right? I've done that, several times, but, that wish never came true. Right? But back then, especially this, the Magi in the pagan world, when they see, a falling star, it predicts that that a ruler would fall if they will see a falling star. No wonder when Herod learned about the star that was seen by the Magi in the east, he was so terrified, right? No wonder he reacted that way, right? Because probably he knew about the saying that when, they see a falling star, a ruler would fall. Maybe he was referring to, he was thinking, that might be me, right? Yes. But you know what? What puzzles me is the star. When you talk about the birth of Jesus Christ, the first thing that would come to our mind is that manger, right? Where you can find the little baby inside. And on top of that manger is a what? What you will see, there's a sign that's the place where the Messiah was born. A star. Our understanding of a star is the star stays there next to the what? That's how we picture it, right? Next to the manger. But if you try to look in Matthew chapter 2, verses 2 and 9, you will see that from the east, the Magi saw the star. And they followed the star, going to Judea. But when they got to Bethlehem, for some reason, the star seemed to what? Disappear. That led them to where? To the palace of Herod. Right? That's why they went there and they inquired, Herod, the king, have you seen this star? Have you heard about the birth of the Messiah? And to the surprise of King Herod, he said, I've never heard of that. In fact, he told them, if you see the star, if you see the child, let me know so I can go there, so I can worship him too. But yet we knew that he had other reasons why he would like to see the star. The Messiah, right? But in verse 9, you will find there that the moment that the Magi left the palace, that is the time that the star reappeared. Have you guys, learned about it before? The star reappeared, and the star guided them to where? To the manger, according to the text. It's in verse 9, folks. Right? That's why, if you try to study the background of these, some commentators or scholars says what the Magi saw was a comet. It was not a star that is just steady there. It was a moving star from east to west. A star that led the Magi to the very presence of the baby, the Messiah. What it tells me is the very presence of the star, the fact that it appeared and it was seen by the Magi, and it was not seen by Herod together with the leaders of the church back then. That means the revelation of the Messiah to the Magi is like intentional. It was God's intention to reveal the Messiah, or the birth of the Messiah, to the Magi, considered as what? Outsiders. Now the question is, why did God reveal the news to the most unlikely people, the Magi? Back then they were outsiders. Why? Why not the leaders of the church? Why not these people that study the law of the prophecies of God, right? In fact, if you study Old Testament, it discourages people to believe in signs and mediums, right? In the book of Deuteronomy, right? It's discouraging people in the Old Testament, to believe in those type of signs. In fact, instead of encouraging them to believe in signs, they are encouraging to what? To believe in prophecies, which what? The leaders of the church did. All right? But after studying this, here's one thing I found, folks, and I hope that you're listening carefully here. I want you to see here the fate of these two groups. The first group is one that studies the Bible, particularly the prophecy. And the other one is a group of men that believes in signs and astrology. But the question is, why did God choose to reveal the birth of the Messiah to the most unlikely group of men? To these people that studies what? Mediums, signs, instead of studying prophecy. Maybe he's sending a message, my dear brothers and sisters. And I'm pretty sure that the reason why you and I, has to celebrate Christmas is in order for you and me to be what? To be reminded of this great message, right? To be reminded of this great message. Well, if you go to the book of Luke, you will see there that Jesus coming to this earth is very intentional, all right? It's not only to save all of us, but to come to this particular group. It was, read earlier in Luke chapter 4, verses 18 and 19, where it says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because He has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, and set the oppressive free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Jesus put an emphasis to the group that is oppressed. Jesus put an emphasis that He came down to this earth for this group, for the people that are oppressed, for the people that are hated, for the people that are ignored, for the people that are not important, for the people that are outcasts. We call these outsiders, right? I don't know if you notice that when you study the book of Chronicles, which is the main Bible readings we have, with Pastor Ravilo for the whole month of December, right? If you study the book of Chronicles, you will find there, names that represent what? Their family, right? So many names. Have you guys noticed that? And sometimes so boring to read them. Names after name, right? But I don't know if you realize that all the names that are mentioned there are names of what? All men. All men. Right? Because, going back, if you study the background of the people back then, we all know that women back then were considered as what? Second-class citizens. Right? Even in the New Testament, they're not allowed to wear, to what? To stand in front of the synagogue. They're not even allowed to go in a certain spot of the temple. There's only a certain spot that is supposed to be for them, right? So that is in the book of Chronicles. But if you go to the book of Matthew, in chapter 1, you will find there Matthew looking, mentioning the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And he's mentioning all of these names from Abraham. From Abraham down to Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ is the seed of Abraham. But I don't know if you notice there that out of these names that he mentioned, 4 of them were women. Have you guys realized that? Comparing the book of Matthew to the book of Chronicles, that is something that is new. Right? That is something that is new. That gives you an idea that Matthew is, saying something. You have to remember, in all the Gospels, it's only the book of Luke and the book of Matthew that talk about, in detail, the birth of the Messiah. But comparing these two Gospels, the book of Luke, when he talks about the genealogy of Jesus Christ, he started with Adam down to Jesus Christ. While in the book of Matthew, he started with what? With Abraham. Because the audience of the book of Luke is basically are the Gentiles. While the book of Matthew, his audience are the Jews. And when you talk about the Jews, they're thinking that they are exclusive. They are the chosen generation. But yet, look at their practices. These are the people that study prophecies. These are the people that study the law of God. But look at their practices. They call other people outsiders because they are the insiders. That's why Matthew is trying to address that. That's why when he even, talk about the genealogy of Jesus Christ, he included these 4 women. They are Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. Because for Matthew, women are important. They should not be considered as second-class citizens because they are equal. We are all equal in the sight of God. The Gospel of Matthew highlights the ministry of Jesus, particularly has his attitude towards people that are considered, outsiders and outcasts. In fact, if you go to chapter 8, you will find there miracles. This is very interesting because scholars call this, a triad of miracles. The first 3 miracles among the triad of miracles that Jesus Christ performed. And all these first 3 miracles that Jesus Christ performed are for what? For the people that are considered as what? Outsiders, just like the Magi. All right? Now let me share to you. The first one is the leper. All right? The leper. The leper are considered to be what? The spiritual and physical outsider in the world back then. Let's go read the word. When Jesus came down from the mountainsides, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Who is the one who approached Jesus Christ here? It was not Jesus Christ, but it was the what? The leper. And moving on, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them." If you try to look at the background of these folks, when you talk about leprosy back then, leprosy was the most dreaded disease in the ancient world. Beyond the slow physical deterioration was the social ostracism that put such persons away from the comfort of home and from the comfort of the community. You know, their practice back then is immediately, as soon as they found out that you have this leprosy, you know, the leper was completely banished from the society. In fact, Moses wrote in the Old Testament, in the book of Leviticus, you know, as long as he has infection, this is in the book of Leviticus, folks, he remains unclean. So basically, when you are a leper, when you have leprosy back then, you are done. Right? You are done. You're going to be what? Outside the walls of any city. You have to live alone. Right? And even in the time of Jesus Christ, if you are a leper, you will be barred from all walled cities, including the city of Jerusalem. It means that they will be what? Excluded, including the worship services that are being done in the temple. And according to Levitical regulations, they are required to wear torn clothes. Look at this, folks. Torn clothes. And they have to avoid brushing their hair, cover the lower part of their face, and cry, "Unclean, unclean," every time someone would come next to them, to avoid what? So that the other people will not jeopardize their health. That is the situation of all the lepers back then. But yet, my dear brothers and sisters, in this story, in the first miracle that Jesus Christ did in this part of the story, Jesus Christ not only healed the leper, but he also reached out his hand. Are you guys following me? He did not only heal the leper, but he reached out his hand and did the unthinkable. And what was the unthinkable, folks? He touched him, which was a big no-no back then. He touched the leper. My dear brothers and sisters, Jesus healed this leper and restored him to his family and to the community. A leper, a person that is spiritually and physically outsider in the presence of the people back then. The second miracle that he performed in this triad of miracles that he performed is, when he gave this big favor to the Roman centurion. When you talk about Roman centurion, this is a symbol of these people that are considered to be what? Ethnic outsider. Right? Ethnic outsider. Let's go to the word. According to the text, when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. "Lord," he said, "my servant lies at home, paralyzed, suffering terribly." Jesus said to him, "Shall I come and heal him?" And look what he said after this. Questioned by Jesus Christ. Then the centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. But just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. And that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard this, he was amazed. Look at this, folks. When he heard this, he was amazed and said to those following him, truly, I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. Wow. But when you talk about this, folks, that was a very interesting conversation. But when you talk about the background of this Roman centurion, what is a Roman centurion? A Roman centurion was the farthest ethnic outsider of the time of Jesus. Why did I say that? Because not only was he a Gentile, when you say a Gentile, not a Jew, doesn't belong to this exclusive group, which they call themselves, right? He was not only a Gentile, he was also a commander in the Roman army, right? He was a Gentile and he was a commander in the Roman army. And what was his job? His job was to keep the Jewish people oppressed and subjugated under the rule of Rome. To the Jewish way of thinking, listen to this, folks. To the Jewish way of thinking, only a leper was more unclean than Gentiles. That includes the Roman centurion. And if lepers could not enter Jerusalem, Gentiles cannot participate in worship services since they are not allowed to go beyond, certain spot of the temple. He would have been considered unworthy of receiving anything from God but judgment because of the type of job that he do, right? Yet, just like the leper, Jesus allowed him to come near and commanded his faith as being greater than any Israelite he had ever met. Please take note of this, my dear brothers and sisters. If the Magi who practices medium and believe in signs that the scripture does not support saw the Messiah, here is another outsider having fully understand the power of the Messiah. Have you guys realized that? This is a very important point, folks, that I would like to emphasize in this study. Here comes outsiders. They don't study the Bible. They don't believe in prophecies. But yet they are the one that was given big favor to experience the very presence of the Messiah. Right? Now let's proceed to the next one, to the third miracle. Peter's mother-in-law. Right? Now if you go to the third miracle, many might say that this is just a random act of Jesus healing, right? Healing of the sick people back then. Because, what he does back then are teaching, preaching, and healing. But he spent more time in what? Healing. So you might say, hey, it's just one random act of Jesus Christ. But, the question is, why would Matthew include this in this first part of this triad of miracles? That means there's a message that we would like to, one thing that you will realize if you study the four Gospels, Matthew is a very organized writer. Very organized writer. That's why, this triad of miracles, you will see 3 miracles, then an interlude, then another 3 miracles, another interlude, then another miracles. That is how organized he was. That's because he was trying to emphasize something. And the fact that the story of the healing of Peter's mother-in-law was included in the first triad, it means that there's a message that they would like to what? To share to his readers. And you have to remember, his readers are what? The Jews. Right? Now let's go to Matthew 8:14 and 15. Here you can find Jesus Christ. He came into Peter's house and he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand and the fever left her. And she got up and began to wait on him. Simple story, right? But again, if you don't understand the background of women back then, you would not really appreciate what Jesus Christ did here. And just like what I said, same thing with the leper, and same thing with the centurion, Roman centurion. Women back then were not considered as a first-class citizen, right? They were considered as what? Second-class citizens. And when you say second-class citizens, they belong to this group that don't have or that doesn't have the complete privilege of the temple of God in Jerusalem. So what you will realize here is, even if women were both healthy and Jews, all right? Even if women were both healthy and Jews, compared to the Roman centurions and the lepers, all right? They could not proceed beyond the court for women in the temple area. That's why, according to many studies that I've done, they were not allowed to what? To enter, to be in the front of the temple. They're not even allowed to speak up when they're in the temple, and they have to cover their head when they're in the temple. So many restrictions compared to men, right? One thing that I realize here, folks, which is very striking. The first two miracles, both of these recipients of the miracles, both of them were men. Okay? Both of them were men. And both of them approached Jesus. Are you with me? Both of them were men, and both of them approached Jesus and begged Jesus to do something for them. But on the third miracle, it was a woman. And who's the one who initiated the contact? It was not the woman. It was not, the mother-in-law of Peter. She was not the one who begged Jesus to come over to heal her. It was Jesus Christ who went to her house so he could heal her. That is something, folks. Given the situation of women back then, that would tell you that women were important in the sight of Jesus Christ. In fact, the very translation, other translation, I believe it's New King James or King James Version, of the phrase, she got up and began to wait on him. The translation of King James here is, actually, she arose and served him. After she was healed, Jesus Christ accepted her service. Are you folks following me here? Which is a big no-no back then. Women cannot serve men. Wow. 3 outsiders. In the eyes of the Jews, of God's people back then, they were accepted by Jesus and received favors. Same thing with the Magi when the Messiah was born. That is why, after Jesus Christ witnessed the faith of the Roman centurion, this is what he said, which is a warning. Matthew chapter 8, verses 10 to 12. This is what he said. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects, all right? In other translation, the word subjects here is actually the sons. All right? the subjects or the sons of the kingdom will be thrown where? Outside. Are you folks following me here? This is very striking. A change of faith. A change of what? Of the outcome of their expectations. Will be thrown outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You know what? Just to give you a little background of these folks, in the minds of the Jews, when the Messiah comes, all right, they're waiting for the Messiah. In fact, up to now, they're still waiting for the Messiah, all right? But back then in their mind, when the Messiah comes, there will be a great feast. There will be a great banquet. But you know who's going to be present only? The people that will be present, the people that will have seats in the banquet table are only the Jews. Gentiles will not be welcomed in that great feast. That's why Jesus Christ, when he saw the faith of this Roman centurion, a Gentile, he commended him for his faith, right? And he said, he twisted their understanding, right? He said, people from the east, people that are not expected to make it to heaven because of their practices and their social standing will be there. This is a great news, folks, right? This is a great news, right? But, the people, the sad news here is, the people who expected to be there will be cast out or will be cast outside. That's why you will find there in the very same gospel, in chapter 7, verse 21, where he says, many will come to me on that day, Lord, Lord, have we not done this? Have we not prophesied? Have we cast out demons? We healed sick people. But Jesus Christ would tell them, get away from me. I never knew you. You are doers of what? Lawlessness. According to this theologian, Frederick Dale Brunner, in his commentary about the Gospel of Matthew, he says, all of Jesus' warnings, look at this, folks, all of Jesus' warnings about the hell or about hell occur in messages to people who believe themselves to be heirs of the kingdom or sons or subjects of the kingdom. Jesus doesn't preach hell to pagans, but to those who think themselves believers. Now, folks, please listen to me very carefully as I say a very important statement here. And I'm going to say this very softly so you can hear me well. All right? I'm going to say it very softly so you can hear me well. Because when I talk softly, that is when you put your ear on me. All right? Listen to this very, folks. What is very obvious here is, in these stories, there are two groups. Two groups. One is a group considered by the Jews outsiders. These are people that don't read the law and practices things that are not supported by the scriptures. And people that became outcasts because of the law. But in the end, both receive a big favor from God. One saw the Messiah, and the other two received healing from Jesus. That's the first group. On the other side of the spectrum is a group that reads the law. Listen to me this very carefully, folks. On the other side of the spectrum is a group that reads the law. teach the law, and follow the letters of the law. They believe in prophecies and wait for the coming of the Messiah, believing that when it happens, they are the only one that would have place in the banquet table. But in our study, folks, this is the group that despite of their waiting and knowledge of prophecies and the law and the Bible, they missed the coming of the Messiah, and eventually did not find a seat in the banquet table prepared for the redeemed. Please don't get me wrong, folks. I'm not here to condemn the first group and say, be like the Magi and be like these outsiders that don't believe in God, that don't believe in the law, in the prophecies, and all these things that are in the, supported by the scripture. But what we all know, from these stories, which is the main point of my sermon, is Jesus Christ is trying to address their character. Jesus Christ is trying to address their attitude, especially toward these people that Christians nowadays and Jews back then considered as outsiders. Are you folks following me? It's the attitude, right? It's the attitude. Thus, I would like to take this moment with you guys, that as we close this study, to try to assess yourself. We are towards the end, only a week before the end of this year. Let's try to assess ourselves. And I hope that everybody is, paying a very close attention here. Let's try to reevaluate ourselves. How are we? How is our attitude towards other people that don't have the same faith like ours? How do we treat them, folks? How do we treat them? If you ask people in our time who don't believe in the Bible, what is their issue with Christianity today? This is what they're going to say. It is the Christian's attitude toward outsiders. Number one is what? Number one among the list is Christians' fear. Christians' fear. Because of fear, people try to what? Christians try to retreat from the world. Because they are afraid to be what? To be contaminated by the world. It's like lepers, right? The world has to say, unclean, unclean. Right? Are you following me here? Unclean, unclean. Right? That's number one, their fear. The second one is their guardedness. Are folks following me? Their guardedness. Yes, Christians are told in the scripture that they have to guard themselves. But the problem is, there are times that their guardedness or our guardedness becomes offensive to others. The third one is their intolerance. Their intolerance of others, since what they believe is different from what their friends or their relatives, co-workers believe. The fourth one is their judgment. And what is the reason why most of the time we judge other people? Because of the law. This is what the law says. I'm different from you. You're outsiders. I'm the insider. Another issue that they have with Christianity in our time today, they would say they give us second importance. They give us second importance because they think that they are the only ones that will have seat in the banquet table when the Messiah comes. Right? That's why, who is the priority? Only the select group. People that study the Bible, and those that don't, second class citizen. Because what's happening, folks, is by doing those things that are mentioned, people, Christians particularly, are putting up walls. And when you try to put walls that separate them and you, the world and Christian, it becomes what? Us versus them. Are you folks following me here? This is very important, folks. This is very important. It becomes us versus them. This is one of these big issues of the people in the world against Christianity, and that includes us, folks. But on the other hand, if you ask people during the time of Jesus why they chose to follow him, many would have said it is Jesus' attitude toward outsiders. If Christians are fearful because they might get contaminated, Jesus Christ was appreciated because of his pursuit. He pursued them. He dined with sinners. He dined with the tax collectors. He pursued them. Right? If Christians, Jews back then and Christians in our time, try to guard themselves and people are offended, Jesus Christ back then, he was opened. Right? He was open. And a proof of that is not only that he healed the leper, but he touched the leper. He touched the leper. Jesus' openness. If Christians' big issue, the world's issue with the Christians is their intolerance, Jesus Christ, he was uncomfortable. His uncomfortable tolerance with his people. He revealed himself to the Magi despite of their flawed beliefs and practices. Yes, Jesus Christ revealed this very important news. Judgmental Christian, judgmental. But Jesus Christ, what people appreciated from Jesus Christ back then is his affirmation. His affirmation of the people around him, no matter what, regardless of their background, regardless of what they're doing. Right? If Christians put the world as secondary importance, Jesus is giving them primary importance. And the last one, folks. If Christians would put walls that divides the world against them, Jesus Christ, what he did when he came down to this earth is he break down walls. Because in the sight of God, in the sight of Jesus, regardless of your color, regardless of your race, regardless of your background, whether you are educated or not educated, you and I are all equal and important in the sight of God. My appeal to you folks today, what we have to realize is, in the kingdom of God, we are all outsiders. No insiders, folks. We are all outsiders, right? And the only insider is Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ said, I'm the only way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to my Father except through me. The fact that we are all outsiders in the eyes of God, and Jesus Christ is the only way, my dear brothers and sisters, instead of looking down to other people, instead of showing this attitude, different attitude to other people, we need to fix our eyes on Jesus Christ, to focus on Him. He is the Messiah. We are all outsiders. And the only way to get Him is through Jesus Christ. Have Jesus Christ in your life. And I do believe that when we celebrate Christmas, this is one of these great messages that God wants you and I to remember and to understand, that when He came down to this earth, He did not come down to this earth for the Jews only. He did not come to this earth for the Christians only. He did not come to this earth for the people that study prophecies only, or study the book of the law only. But He came down to this earth for everyone that will believe in Him. And that could be you and me. May God bless all of us today.